would you be
Yes.
Would you be displaying the presentation or I share the presentation?
So, if you can share, then please share from your side.
Okay, sure, I will.
Yeah. So very good afternoon to all of you. I am Amit Kumar Patil. Today, on behalf of this esteemed institution and on behalf of me, I welcome you all into this IGFRI Diamond Jubilee online lecture series 2022 on entrepreneurship development in processing, fodder and allied crops. And this lecture series is being organized by Agri-Business Incubation Center, ICAR-Indian Grassland and Fodder Research Institute, Jhansi, in collaboration with Indian Society of Agricultural Engineers, New Delhi, and Range Management Society of India, Jhansi. So till now, into this online lecture series, 2 lectures have been delivered in the April and May. On one was on fodder-based entrepreneurship development, and second was on bamboo processing and its use. Now this is the time for lecture 3 and lecture 4, and today's first lecture will be on community-led rangeland revival and management in CPR setup, and it will be delivered by engineer Ravi Pratap Singh, ex-member Niti Aayog Empowered Committee, and currently he is working as International Program Director at Action, an international NGO, and he is currently in Colombo, Sri Lanka. And second lecture for today's will be on hydroponics and aeroponics, a new vista in agripreneurship, and it will be delivered by engineer Praveen Sharma, founder Flora Consult. So before inviting our today's guest speaker, engineer Ravi Pratap Singh, I will be giving brief about him. So engineer Ravi Pratap Singh is the international program director with Aide Action, an international NGO headquartered at Geneva. After completing his Master of Technology in Soil and Water Conservation Engineering, he pursued International Development Management Program at the Ottawa University, Ottawa, Canada, under the Aga Khan Foundation Fellowship. With around 30 years of experience in the social development sector, engineer Ravi has conceptualized and led many innovative and large-scale development projects in the area of education, sustainable livelihoods, community-managed natural resource development, and disaster response and preparedness. He has also been invited in developing programs and organizational strategies at the international level, and has worked with some of the prominent NGOs and international NGOs across South Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Europe. So, sir, please, I would like to invite engineer Ravi Pratap Singh, sir, for his lecture on community-led rangeland revival and management in CPR setup. Sir, please, you can share your PPTs.
Okay, I was going to share. In the meantime, I get a message that host has disabled sharing of screen. So either you can enable my sharing,
yes,
or you share it directly. If you can enable the sharing, then I'll be able to share it.
Yes. So now please try, sir, once.
Okay. Yes, I can.
Yeah, yes, please. No.
Just wanted to check if my screen is visible.
Yeah, sir. It's visible. Please,
okay.
Please go on full screen mode.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So thank you very much for providing me this opportunity to share my experience on the occasion of Golden Jubilee celebrations of IGFRI. Sorry, Diamond Jubilee under the Diamond Jubilee online lecture series. And I'm going to talk about the experience, which is not recent, but it has been proven, and it is some 15 years back this experimentation was done. And it is still working, which means that it is something which worked very well. And this is about community-led range management revival in the common property resource setup. So this is something which I'm going to talk about from the perspective of social entrepreneurship, not the entrepreneurship for profit, but it's more of a social entrepreneurship. And I think as responsible professionals, whether we are into rangeland, grassland management, or in soil and water conservation, or any other profession, it is our responsibility to see that the use of resources is shared by the larger group of people. So it is in this context I'm going to talk about the work. Let me start with the broad context. And this is not something which is very new to many of you. You all know that if we are looking at terrestrial biome, grasslands occupy the largest area on the earth, whether it is in the form of gaucher land, as we call in India, or grasslands within and outside the forest areas. So, and that is something which provides obviously the fodder to animal, but also animals which are fed on this fodder provide milk, meat, and leather for human being or for human consumption. It is also very useful for restoration of ecosystem by regulating the carbon emissions and so on. This, however, has been observed that the grassland ecosystem, the quality and diversity both, is declining at a very fast pace. And this is primarily because of either this area is being encroached by urban development or by extension of farmlands, which are happening in India and outside as well. Now, one of the reasons for deterioration of quality is also excessive use of chemicals and pesticides. And if we look at India, overgrazing of these lands, because they are not controlled, they are open access resources, and therefore they are not controlled, and therefore they are overgrazed, and they are degraded therefore. Now, all this leads to what is called tragedy of the commons, where the selfish users are those who are powerful, and those who are excluded and poor both suffer because of this. I'll explain a little bit more on what is tragedy of commons later on. So if we look at this overall context, and if we look at community rangeland or grazing land in India, they are primarily either panchayat grazing lands, which are demarcated for grazing purposes, or they are other wastelands or revenue lands, which are utilized by the community for grazing purposes, or they are degraded forest lands, which are illegally or legally allowed for grazing. Now that's in India. Now, if we look at the status of grazing lands or gaucher in India, primarily means I'm using gaucher word because gaucher is the designated grassland area in the rural ecosystem or rural eco-livelihood system. Now, if we have observed, every village will have gaucher land allocated within the overall spectrum of their land. It ranges from 5 to 50 hectares, depending on how much of land is available or what is the cattle population of that village or neighboring villages, or what is the demand. So based on that, the land is designated. Now, they are also, as I said earlier, they are also called panchayat lands in some places, which are for grazing purposes. And these lands are deteriorating or reducing because of the increased livestock population, pressure on these resources. As I said earlier, there's a constant grazing or uncontrolled grazing, I would say. Then there are also encroachments by powerful people of the village. And another thing which is due to the policy reasons, there's this land redistribution policy for landless farmers. And it has been observed in some cases where gaucher and common lands have been redistributed to poor landless families under the land redistribution, land reform, under the land reform policy of Government of India and various state governments. Though it is contested in many places, but the cases have happened and they are quite common. Now, what is happening is that because of this degradation, mostly what happens is that the pressure shifts to the forest lands in the neighboring areas. So the people or the farmers who are rearing cattle or animals, they start sending them to forests for grazing purposes. And therefore, it leads to forest degradation as well. So there's a longer chain which goes on. And the National Sample Survey Organization had done, this data is for 1999, but I think it's quite indicative that every 5 years, there is roughly 2% reduction in the common lands. And that's quite significant. So that's something which we have to keep in mind when we are looking at the social enterprise of developing gaucher lands or the grasslands or the rangelands. Now, I'll go back again to the importance of these gauchers. And, apart from maintaining the ecological balance, they also support vegetation for the livestock grazing. They also provide renewable resources into food and fiber products. The other important part is that the kind of grass cover, which it means it is the quality cover, if it is maintained well, it also provides cover for protecting the soil erosion in that area from water or in desert areas from wind as well. Now, these are also the lands where some of the plantations are done, which are shrub plantations, which are for biomass generation. And there are many examples of that, or sometimes feedstock for industrial material have also been developed. Now, if we look at these habitats, which are predominantly grasslands, they also have large and small mammals, many birds, and millions of insects, which grow within this habitat. The other thing is that when the grasslands are managed well, they also control the runoff. And when there is a controlled runoff, we all know that there's more water which will infiltrate down into the land, enhance the groundwater levels, and so on and so forth. Now, most importantly, in today's context, when we are talking about the climate change and related things, The grazing lands also scatters millions of tons of carbon, and therefore it reduces the atmospheric CO2 and reduces the global warming impacts um, uh, and the climate change. It contributes positively in the climate change issues. So if we go to very specifically with reference to poor people, I would like to quote a study which was done long back by Dr. N.S. Jodha. It is a seminal work by him on commons, which was done in, I think, late 80s, early 90s. Then he worked for the World Bank, and that's where a major report was published by the World Bank, which was to look at the impact of degradation of common lands on poor people, and what are the policy perspectives on this, which are very, very important to protect, conserve, and enhance the quality of such common lands. What this study says is that around 84% plus, it goes up to 100%, rural poor are dependent on commons, whether it is fuel, fodder, or food items. Between 14 to 23% of households' income comes from these common resources, which are very, very important sources of income for them, which reduces income inequities in the society or in the village society. Also, the dependence of livestock is almost 48 to, is very heavy, and it means that if this land is not available, common land for grazing is not available, the requirement to rear the current level of livestock is almost diversion of 48 to 55% of croplands for food and cash crops means the food and cash crop land has to be converted into fodder crops if we have to maintain the same level of livestock. And the alternative of reducing the number of animals in proportion to the availability of these fodder resources, one would entail 68 to 76% loss of draft power. Draft power, which is not so important nowadays with the mechanization of agriculture, but still it is important in many rural areas of India. And 43% loss of farmyard manure, which is very, very important in the given situation where we have to promote more and more organic content in our soil, enrich our soils, which are becoming more and more infertile because of the chemical fertilizers used. Then let me go to the work which I did some 15, 18 years back in the Mandla district of Madhya Pradesh. And in I'm talking about a village, a specific village, but the work was in around 15 villages of Nivas development block of this. I'll be talking about Bhalwara Mal village, which is around 12 kilometers away from the block headquarters and 70 plus kilometers from Mandala. Now this house is a small, this village is a small village with 220 houses, or they were 220 houses. They might have increased now significantly. Now, what is important to notice here is that the major source of livelihood for these 219 families at that time was agriculture, which was significantly supplemented by the livestock. Everyone had cows, few people had buffaloes or goats and other things. And they were also going to the neighboring villages where the forest areas were there. So they were collecting non-timber forest produce, which were also supplementing their income. But livestock was the major source. So this area, this village has 600 plus hectares of land. out of that, 228 hectares of land is unavailable for cultivation because it was rock outcrop or water body or whatever. But what is very significant to note here is that 71 hectares of cultivable wasteland, which was including gaucher, was also there in the village, which was significant. So it is almost, 12% of the total village area. And if we just remove the uncultivable land, then it becomes 20-25% of the area. So you can understand the kind of dependence which people had on the livestock and livestock's dependence on this gaucher land in the village. But this will give you, those who are not very well acquainted with the geography. On the left hand side means Madhya Pradesh. You will all understand where Madhya Pradesh in India is. This is south eastern part of Madhya Pradesh, and I have then projected the map of Mandla. And if you look at the this part, this is the Nivas block. Now I have also shown you a kind of map which shows the kind of grasslands areas are there in this part, this northern part, and this area as well. But this area, the yellow part is the grassland parts. So what we did was that it was important for us to understand that what is happening to this land. Now, one was that this land was not very clearly visible. So it was important for us to find out how much of gaucher land is available in these villages where we were working, including this particular village. Because there were some lands, but nobody knew in the village which land is the designated gaucher land. Then we realized that there were some lands so we reached out to, there's Saat Bara Ki Nakal and all those things, and also topographical maps, I would like to say, topographical maps and village maps through the Patwari we accessed, and we found out that the large chunk of land was designated uncultivable gaucher land. And then when we started looking at these lands on the spot, we realized that many of them were had boundary walls or fencings of some sort, but they were left fallow. They were not being used. So when we found out that these lands are being actually encroached by either one of the panches, sarpanches, or some powerful people in the villages, then we realized that it is important for us to initiate a comprehensive process of recovery of these lands first to start with, and then the revival and management comes. And that means I'll be presenting in a very simplistic form, but it was not that easy because it took almost 6 years to complete this whole process. So I will put this up in the form of this 5-step process, which has later on been kind of prescribed by IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, for rangeland management development globally, based on global experiences as well. So this starts with partnership building, which is where we need to understand who are the stakeholders and others, and then develop linkages with them, partnerships with them, then do a situation and context analysis, then do comprehensive mapping and planning of the grassland development. Then we develop reports and collect all the information, put it up in a systematic form at one place for easy retrieval and use, and then constant monitoring and evaluation of the work, which then feeds back into the partnership building again. Because once this is done, then we go back and talk to the communities again. And as I'm talking about community-led process, extensive participatory approaches were adopted. where we started with PRA exercises, participatory rural appraisal exercises, which included social map development, village resource map, livelihood seasonality. There are thousands of other things which were done. So, so if we look at the first step in partnership building, it required identification and analysis of all the important stakeholders who were involved in either use or management of the voucher land. Use or misuse also, one can say. Then we had community level discussions and meetings where we presented the entire thing, and then identification of the area was also done, where people said, yes, we knew that, but we were not very clear whether this is the designated voucher land and so on and so forth. So that's what was done in the partnership building phase. Then we looked at the situation and context analysis, where we wanted to establish the baseline map based on the identification of voucher land. As I said, first we started with the district level village and town directory, because that gives a comprehensive list of land use, village level land use for the entire district in each of the block. Then we looked at the village land records and various other sources. So that was put up, and then it was verified by the villagers through the village land maps and so on, so participatory maps and so on. Then we reviewed the current status of all these voucher lands, and then we tried to understand that what kind of challenges are there in revival of these lands, recovery and revival. In some cases, for example, there were powerful people involved. They were obviously not very willing to let go this land because they wanted to keep it in their control for their future, means for their children to have some kind of land with them. Obviously in excess with the patwaris and the local revenue officials. Now, these things were required, and then we developed this for each stakeholder, whether they were encroachers or the potential users in future. We said what their rights are on these lands, but with rights, what their responsibilities are, means in terms of how do they revive, how do they maintain, and so on and so forth. Then look at the relationship between those who should potentially use this and those who were encroaching it, and so on. And then that helped us develop a greater social harmony dynamics within the community. And for each one of them, if they are upgraded or they are revived and managed well, what kind of returns each one of them will get. I would highlight this last part of this table, which became very important for people to get agree, particularly powerful people to get agree or to agree to release these lands from their control. Because then they saw that if there's a better management, they in effect will get better returns individually as well. So this table or this kind of analysis was extremely important. Then it required obviously the mapping and planning, where we use the participatory maps to inform and make every member of the community about the existence of these lands, their status, and so on and so forth, which were known to them, but they were not, means they had seen it, but they were not aware about it. Then it required a development of an action plan, so that we can plan how it will be recovered, how it will be revived, and how it will be managed. And then obviously we had to then establish some kind of governance at the local level, which will, or community institution, which will keep running this in the future, at that time and in the future also. So that's where we looked at each of those issues in a very systematic form. We looked at what kind of interventions would be required, what location specific requirements will be what are the resources required for those kinds of interventions, what is the time frame, and who will be the responsible, who will do what kind of thing. So this also was done in a very systematic manner. Then storing of this data and presenting it in a more comprehensive way in a systematic collation of, in the form of systematic collation of this data was very, very important. So the reports were prepared, they were kept at the village level, at this local organization's office level as well, for the constant review of this. First, acknowledgement, second, endorsement, and then for review in the future. So that once that was done, the last step was is the monitoring and evaluation, which is very, very important when these development plans have been done for the voucher land, which stakeholder is doing what kind of thing. It is very, very important to keep reviewing it on a regular basis. And then along with that, it is also equally important to institutionalize the governance processes at the community level. Now, here I would again like to highlight that these processes include very strong conflict resolution mechanisms. And that is something which we had to put in place for the future sustainability of the work. So if we look at what resulted, this whole process of, as I said, recovery of the encroached voucher lands, revival and management, it took almost 6 years, but the entire 73 hectares of cultivable waste of Bhalwara Mal village was converted into voucher land. So some was voucher land, some was wasteland, but it was agreed that it will be used. Panchayat resolution was taken and it was decided that it will be used as a voucher land because they understood the importance of this voucher land for the entire village and each individual family there. And there was work in 14 villages of Nivas at that point of time, and 92% of the voucher land, which is close to 1,000 hectares, or I think it was 900 hectares of land, was released and revived. Now, what is important outcome of this whole thing or impact is that very controlled exploitation of these resources started and continued because the self-regulatory mechanisms were developed, which were led by the communities and their representatives, because panchayat members' involvement is very, very important. And there is a sustainable management of voucher lands. So, so that's where I will stop, and I will wait for your questions, queries, and other things, so that I can either go back to the presentation or respond to your queries without going to the presentation. So that's where I'll close. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any participants want to ask any question to Engineer Ravi sir? Please ask. Sir, in chat box, one question is there. Which grass we can use in desert area of Rajasthan?
I think don't ask me these questions now, because I have almost forgotten. I have stopped practicing soil and water conservation related work for last 15 years or so. So I'm not the best person, but there are many people at IGFRI, Dr. Pathak and various others can definitely answer this question. I'm sorry, I won't be able to give you the answer for what is the best grass for the desert area.
Actually, just I want to add for this question, for the desert area, Leguminous Syndicus is the most suitable grasses.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Thank you so much.
Just myself, RV Kumar, I am heading one of the division, that is the Grassland and Silvipasture Management at IGFRI Jhansi.
Wonderful.
Okay, sir. Just as you have presented regarding this CPRs, that is the voucher lands, but at that time you have taken 6 years to get it to convert into this practicable form. But nowadays it is becoming more complicated, and most of the Gochar lands are not, you can say that, well in shape. So it is very difficult to work on these Gochar lands, and the villagers are not able to get the what benefit they can have from the Gochar lands. So still there should be a certain policy how to utilize these type of Gochar lands and how best we can establish grassland or pasture lands in that area so that the villagers can get benefit from that land. Because still in UP, MP, there is a lot of problem of the Anna Pratha. That's so many animals are on the roads, and so this is the real time where we should concentrate on how to revive the Gochar lands for getting the maximum benefit, particularly for the villagers of that village.
Mm-hmm. You are very right. Actually, it requires a lot of determination at the community level, and therefore those who are working on the revival have to work with the communities quite a lot. It is not just a science or scientific work, yeah, or technical work. It is quite a lot of social work as well. Means social engineering is very, very important in this whole thing. And that's what I realized. Means I myself was trained as engineer, but when I started working with them, I realized that these things do not work in isolation. Yeah. And therefore, one of the things which was done in this particular project, which I would suggest to everyone, and which I'm quite confident it works, whether it is forest revival or grassland revival, is complete closure of the land for 1 or 2 years. So two rain cycles, if you stop the use, it's very difficult. So what we had done, for example, in this particular village, Balavarmal, I remember there were 4 or 5 different lands. So some of them we realized that they are better quality ones. So we said, which were already encroached and therefore they were fenced and all that. They had slightly better status. So we asked the villagers to close other 4 and keep 5th one open. So they said, okay, fine. They also complained that there's a difficulty and we are not able to, then we have to take them away to the forest area, nearby forest area for grazing and all that. So all that required a lot of persuasion. And that's how it works. But complete closure of the land for any exploitation for 2 years is one of the best strategies for revival of grasslands or forest lands.
Any other questions?
I think Dr. Sunil Tiwari is there in the meeting. He might have some discussion at CP division. Okay, I think there is no question from audience, Amit.
Yes.
Let us thanks to
Sir Tiwari sir.
Tiwari sir is there.
Yes.
Hello.
Sunil Tiwari.
Whether I am audible?
Yes, audible.
No, it was a nice presentation, having field observation and report from ground zero, I can say. There have been difficulties, there are constraints, but these are the learning lesson also. From such experienced person, we can see how things can move ahead. There are hurdles, there are constraints, but there is always way out. This institute is also working in many of the areas related to natural resource management, grassland rejuvenation, and silvopasture management promotion strategies. So we are looking forward to have such interactions, and the recommendations and the points coming out such deliberations, I think this will be very useful. So I appreciate and congratulate the speaker who has given a very good presentation and thought-provoking suggestions for coming days. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Sunil.
Thank you, Dr. Tiwari. I think there is one question from Rahul Bishnoi on the chat, where he's asking any government policy which help villagers or villages to close a part of land. I don't think there is any policy, or there can't be any policy for closure of use of such land. But it has to be self-regulatory. I think that's the best thing. And at the panchayat level, they can come up with a resolution in the Gram Sabha to not have or stop the use temporarily for a particular piece of land. So at the Gram Sabha level, if it is approved, that's something which becomes a law for those set of people. So that would be, I think, that would be the best thing. Because the government policies, even if they are formulated, means there are a lot of issues related with its execution and so on. And even if there is execution, there is a lot of resistance from people because people don't understand the rationale behind these things. And therefore, these policies should be as local as possible, so that everyone, every single stakeholders involved in this whole process is aware of the reasons for having such a policy. So I would say that yes, policy has to be there, but at the panchayat level or at the village Gram Sabha, approved by the village Gram Sabha.
Hello, thank you, Dr. Ravi Pratap Singh. There is one question in the chat box from Dr. Ravindra Misra. He wants to share his experience regarding to manage common and pasture land. I invite him to share his experience. Mr. Ravindra Misra, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Actually, I am going to share my experience in this Udaipur, where I did this work on pasture development, especially in this with NABARD supported climate proofing waterfall project. Actually, we divided common land or pasture land, including all westland, in 3 parts actually: permanent closure for some time, then semi-closure and closure, semi-closure and open grazing. So we close permanently 1 block, and second block semi-closed it, and the third block is open for grazing because we can't stop grazing in villages. So in one year open grazing done in 1 year, 2 years, then that part closed and semi-closure open. So rotational grazing going on in semi-closure and open part. And in 2-3 years, the permanent close, 2-3 years, the plant is grow up. Then we open that and close the 2. Like this, we rotation going on. So that I think that slowly the big plant grow. Then slowly this all area developed.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Dr. Misra. Dr. Ravi Kumar, can you conclude, sir, this lecture?
What, sir? Repeat.
Can you conclude this lecture, this session? After this session, Mr. Praveen Sharma will take lecture on hydroponics and aeroponics.
Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah,
I invite you to conclude lectures.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Pathak. Actually, this was a lecture from Mr. Ravi Pratap Singh, and it was, you can say that the work done by him, experience gained by him on the CPRs, how to use gauchers, how to put these gauchers, you can say that in a shape where you can say the grassland, pasture lands can be developed and all the villagers can get benefited. He has also given suggestions to have a, you can say that the gaucher with full of grasses. At least we should have some certain management like rotational grazing. He has advocated certainly rotational grazing. Some parts you can divide your area into 4 parts, and 1 part you can open and rest 3 you can close. After having grazing for 2-3 months, then you can open another part. So this is the way through which you can manage your grassland. So he has given some sorts of, you can say, light how to manage the things. And really, it all depends upon how best we can sensitize our villagers or users, because ultimately they are the users until and unless they are not well convinced. So it is very difficult to, you can say that, maintain such type of gaucher lands. Sometimes there is the overgrazing. Also, we have to suggest him. And certainly, if they are the users, certainly it takes time. But after, you can say that certain time they will be able to listen. These are the for benefits of us, that they will use it as a scientifically. So certainly, we as a scientist, and also villagers as a users, and also you can say that the implementing agency all have to cohesive in nature, and then we should plan a work so that it can be set up in a well direction. So at last, I congratulate also speaker as well as thank from all our viewers that you have given such a nice presentation, and in future too we will invite you for such type of excellent lecture. Thank you.
Most welcome, Dr. Kumar. And thank you so much, Dr. Pathak. And I would also like to thank Dr. Chandra, the director of IGFRI, on this occasion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Engineer Ravi Pratap Singh ji. And after your session, I request you to join with us in the next lecture of Engineer Praveen Sharma.
Sure, sure.
I invite Praveen Sharma, sir.
Here I am. Very good afternoon. Namaskar. Yes, I am available, sir.
Yes,
Am I
sir.
audible?
Yeah, you're audible. You can share your PPTs.
Sir, I request here that there is some questions in chat box. Some people are also wanted to talk in Hindi. So I think you may mix your language Hindi plus English so that everybody can understand. Okay, sir.
Bilkul, bilkul.